going to get started. Greetings, friends, and
Right.
welcome to the show today. I am delighted to have with me Carey Newman, who is the executive editor of Fortress Press, formerly at Baylor University Press, and before that, a theologian and still a theologian. If there's one person who's transformed my writing late in life, it is Carey Newman, as I wrote the biography of Walter Brueggemann, who would not tolerate anything I was doing until I did what he wanted me to do. Which I initially resisted. And then I realized that the older I get, I realize that there are some people who are just good at their craft. They're not arrogant. They just are able to do what they do because they do it well. And it did not take me long to figure out that Carey Newman knew what he was talking about. And so he said, follow me. And I did. And I will be forever grateful. It's changed my teaching, the way I teach about writing. It's changed the way I think about my own writing and other people's writing. And the delightful thing is that Carey has come out with a new book called The Mango Tree by Friendship, published by Friendship Press. And he is my guest today. And welcome, Carey. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you, Conrad. It's good to be here.
So what I love about this book is that it puts into writing so much of what I felt like I absorbed, plus a whole lot more. You've got all of these chapters, which you say the reader can start anywhere. And I love that because from the get-go, you're telling us that writing can start anywhere, that it's not necessarily linear. And so talk a little bit more about where the reader, tell us about the background of the Mango Tree. Where did it come from for you? What impacted your decision to put this book in print?
I was at a dinner party last night and somebody asked me a similar question. And the answer was when I was in seminary and I turned in a paper and it was returned to me with a D-. And the scribbled marks on the paper in red were great ideas, terrible writing. And so what? 40 years ago, those words have haunted me. And they've haunted me all of my life. And so I started learning to be a writer when I got that D- handed back to me. And I do think that learning to be a writer is a lifelong pursuit. I don't think there's no formula for it. And this is something that, wow, our world today will foist upon potential authors is that there is a formula. There is just add water. There's and people who have books that kind of explode into a market after the fact, they will come up with some sort of formula that they think caused that to happen and tell others that they need to do this too if they want to have the same sort of an impact. And so there's this devilish slippery slope of I think of inaccuracy about what constitutes an author. And what makes an author and makes a poet is life itself. And it's realizing that you have to become authentic in your own writing and show up as a person in your own writing. That doesn't mean use the first person pronoun or write a memoir. It means that you have to risk something in your writing. Annie Dillard in her great book, which I recommend to everybody. I mean, if you're going to read anything about writing, read Annie Dillard's little Pulitzer-winning book. I mean, it's just an amazing piece. She talks about the author being willing to take the axe and strike the stump and not just the wood. If you aim at the wood, you're going to hit the wood. But if you want to cut the wood, you've got to aim at the stump. And writers, out of their own fears, sometimes just aim at the wood, especially academics. Academics learn to hide behind all the artifices that are part of the academic world. Quotations, footnotes, concessive clauses, passive voice, all of these things that cloak ourself from what it is we're doing. And what Mango Tree is really an invitation to jump over the fence into another kind of writing.
I think that's what, it resonated with me for so many reasons. But one is that in the classroom, I find students today, more so than ever, but it's always been the case, are interested in what I want them to do. And they're interested in, is there a template? Is there a rubric? Is there a study guide? And I resist that all of the time, because I say, what I'm trying to do as an instructor, teacher these days is bring out the gift in you. And I help you call that gift forward. And I don't know what it's going to look like when it appears. I get the same kind of feeling from your coaching of me, but also in the mango tree, that there's a bit of ordered chaos or disordered chaos, but underneath it all are these incredible gifts that emerge if we allow them to, Carey.
Yeah. Yeah, writing's a snowflake, and authors are snowflakes. So when you squeeze that, you get something that's distinctly unique. And getting comfortable with that is hard. I mean, becoming self-conscious of that which is unique to you, and then being okay with that is a difficult process. I think there are some writers who are unconscious. They just channel, and they've channeled it without necessarily thinking about it, and it's worked, and they just do it. And I mean, there are lucky people like that, who are not watching themselves do it as they do it. They just do it. But most of us, you know, and I would consider myself what I call a bricklaying writer. I mean, I lay bricks. I mean, I plop them down and slap some mortar on it, and you know, it's one brick at a time. And Mango Tree is not a long book. It's short, and it took me 5 years, and I figured out the number of words that I wrote on average per day, and it was like 7. It's that slow. And I think for most of us, writing is slow and hard and unpoetic. And it's for others, I think they come out of the womb with the DNA chip, and they've just got it, and it's unconscious for them. There are some people who practice what I call cultural ventriloquism. They have this ability to speak in the language of culture just naturally, and their writing seems to catch fire. Other people, their ideas live at the very edge. What they're interested in lives at the very edge of cultural consciousness, and their work brings into constellation that which is gnawing at people, a large number of people in culture, and they're able to put their finger on it. Now, if you combine cultural ventriloquism with this ability to sense what's at the edge of cultural consciousness but hasn't been said before, you've got a real dynamite kind of possibility. And there are people like that, and I'm not sure they're really conscious of all that. Right? So Mango Tree is for those of us who lay bricks, and we want to build something beautiful with the bricks that we lay. So it's an invitation to be poetic with what is, for most of us, a very hard thing to do, and that's to write.
One of the things that you said in the book that struck me was that every writer exposes themselves to a public that wants to see them. And I don't quite remember how you put it, but capricious readers who want to see you write in your own blood, or something like that. What do you mean by that? Because there is this kind of self-exposure that does seem necessary. And sometimes, what did you mean by that?
Yes. So that's a really intertwined question. So let me peel off a couple of the pieces and isolate if I can. First of all, readers are fickle. Readers read as readers read. And readers read fast, readers read slow. Readers read on trains, readers read on planes. Readers will read backwards. Readers will read and stop, put down, not pick it up for another week. Readers do not obey the rules of reading. There are no rules for reading. Readers read as readers read. And if you write for readers, you're writing for a moving target. One of the admonitions of Mango Tree is simply this. Don't worry about readers. A book is written to itself. A book begins with a prompt. We call it an introduction in an academic book, but it's a prompt, and it reaches through to a plentitude, an ending, a fullness through the body of the work. And that forms a kind of hermetically sealed world, if you will. A book is written to itself, and it enjoys itself when it finds concord among its parts. So trying to break in and write to readers is like an actor in the middle of a Shakespearean play stopping and addressing the audience and saying, now, what I'm about to say is really, really important. And William Shakespeare wrote these lines just so you would hear this kind of a cadence and this kind of a resonance with what was said back in Act One. So all of you in the audience, listen up to what I'm about to say. And then she goes back to the play. When you address the reader, you break the fiction of the book itself. You disrupt it, you speed bump it. And readers, their minds are going to wander off. They're going to wonder about their grocery list and, what is taking place and, on MSNBC, who knows? You can't break the fiction. So readers read as readers read. And when a writer writes, they're writing this world, and that's to expose yourself. You can't be detached from that world that you're creating in a book. And I had one of my colleagues, she sent me a book recently. It's an ethics book, and she was unsure about it. And she was unsure about it because the author was writing a serious academic book and using a memoir genre to try and get at it. And so a traditional subject with a atypical genre, and it was a mixture of genres because there was still some didactic academic trappings to it. So it was a mishmash of genres. And so she was unsure. So she sent it to me and said, what do you think about this? And so I started in, and I probably read 1,000 words, 2,000 words. And I immediately emailed her back and I said, oh, this is a mess. It's an absolute mess, but we should publish it because it's authentic. Authenticity is the hallmark of self-exposure, even in an academic book. The Enlightenment has taught us to treat everything we write about as an object, and we're detached from it. And the more distance we have from that which we're writing about, the better, because that is perceived to be what you're a detached observer, a scientific observer, and that means that your detachment is street cred, that you're not somehow shading the truth. And actually, it's the opposite. That if you reverse the subject-object relationships inside the book, you realize that an author is involved with their subject matter. Oh, okay. So if you're writing about irregular Akkadian verbs, it's really hard to be personally involved with the irregular Akkadian verb. Yeah, I can come up with loads of examples in academia. I mean, you're writing about pottery shards that were pulled out of an excavation in somewhere in Syria. I mean, it's going to be really hard. But when you're writing about God, or you're writing about some aspect of virtue ethics or whatnot, I mean, you're personally involved with that. It's hard to be detached, and feigning detachment complicates the writing.
One of the things I say in class, often in my race and ethnic class, and my other courses as well, is that when we are able to objectify groups of people, we can do whatever we want to do to them and sleep well at night. I mean, that's,
Yes.
but I never thought about it in terms of our writing, that if we think of our writing as an object, rather than a subject, we are going to keep it at distance, and we will do things to it that we're not even aware are, that if we engaged ourselves, it would be totally different. And I hadn't thought about that before.
Yes, I think that's right, Conrad.
The other question I have for you is one of the other questions is that you say even the noetic is poetic. All writing is poetic. Can you say more about that? Because I think we've distinguished poets from everything else. And when I was writing, you kept calling out the inner poet in me. That's the language you would use. And you did it in a way that gave me confidence that there was something there. Can you speak to that?
Yeah. So I think it's a continuum. So I would say all writing is poetic. Even how to put together your IKEA shelf is poetic. It's just really bad poetry. So if you think about writing as all poetic, then what we're really debating is the concentration of poetry in a piece of writing. And Mango Tree is a nudge, a gentle nudge, maybe a strong invitation for that writing which has had less poetic properties to have some more poetic property to it. There's no reason why um, even one of your dry sociology books, Conrad, can't be interesting at the same time. I mean, this is the great Horace line, "Profit with delight." You can write academic work that's profitable, but doesn't mean it has to be devoid of every bit of delight in reading it. And so I think all writing is poetic. And so when noetics write noetic work, um, uh, I think they ought to be more poetic in their noetic. And there's no reason why those have to be um, uh, oxymoronic. They're not.
So how much of this is a function of modernity? I think back, you mentioned the Enlightenment, and Max Weber, I use Weber in all my classes, talked about the iron cage of rationality that would impact all of us and lock us in, and that only charismatic figures could release us from that, and the engagement of old ideals. How much of this is going back, or how much of this is a charisma that you're calling out of people to break out of what modernity has really trained us to is good writing?
I think there's something to that. And in a couple of the long and serpentine notes in the back of the book, I trace something of the intellectual history of the academic and the social history. I did a tip of the cap to my sociology friends out there. The book is not just purely phenomenology. There's a good amount of sociology in the footnotes.
There's a chapter called sociology.
There is, and I trace the and it's a complex one because it's the confluence of um, uh, several very powerful historical forces. The whole notion of professional associations, the whole notion of guilds, the notion of apprenticeship, um, uh, the way the Catholic Church institutionalized this, and the way in which the church and the university became intertwined at the founding of universities, and how universities themselves shaped the life of the academic, giving a kind of liturgy and even a kind of sacramental path for the academic. I mean, this is a very profound and deeply seated part of the life of Western academics that goes unexamined. Now, I will say this, that it's about to break apart. I mean, it's clear that the our present moment is witnessing not only the questioning of democratic foundations, but we're questioning all kinds of institutional foundations, including that of the university. And so, I mean, these are longer, kind of deeply seated, nuanced sociological questions that you can trace out in the notes. But I do think there's something to the idea that modernity foisted upon the academic a style of acceptable discourse that alienated the author from the thing that they were producing. And you can hear it all the time. I had a Zoom this last week with a very successful major university dean, and she said to me, she goes, I've written she oversees tenure of all of her faculty. She says this to me, I've given up on writing academic work myself. I am so tired of that. I want to write something else. So this prodigal wish to go out and go to the far country of writing is inside of every academic. And so Mango Tree is trying to get some of that prodigal desire inside the academic work, so you don't have to leave it. You can put it inside of it, and we enjoy what we do. And it's just not a hate relationship with the books that we write.
I think that prodigal quote is almost directly right out of the book. And I love that. And it reminded me of Parker Palmer, that we have these dreams, and I tell my kids in class, we have these dreams, and then they get squelched and they get squished. And part of what I hear in Mango Tree is a calling out again of those dreams that were crushed in our writing. And lots of us wrote poems as kids, and then we stopped because they weren't good enough or whatever. One last thing before we talk about the webinar. One of the things that impressed me about this book is just how you can start it, as you said, anywhere in the book. And it's about editors, it's about the press, it's about the publishing process, it's about writing, it's cultural. It seems to me, whatever one's interested in regarding writing, publishing, editing, there's something in here for everybody.
Yeah, I would like to think so, but I'm the author of the book, so yeah, take that at face value. So I think one of your earlier comments is, as we started talking, is really important, that writing is not a linear process. Writing, I mean, this is a Anne Lamott trope here, is that you vomit on the page, just vomit on the page, blah, and get it out there. And I think there's a discovery process to writing, and I think that's equally true of the larger ecosystem that surrounds writing. That we think it's a lockstep. I do this, I then get an agent, or I find a publisher, and then it gets published, and that there's these kind of linear. It's a very linear process to it, and it's not. It's not at all. Writing is just like life. And in fact, life, living and writing and plotting are they have very deep analogical correspondences. And boy, Peter Brooks, in his book, Reading for the Plot, is so instructive about the way in which all of these things line up and have very interesting kind of correspondences among them: living, writing, plotting, all of it. So yeah, I would like to think that the book has many entry points to it. Now, I do say in, I have a little opening section on how to read the book. There is a logic to it. I mean, there is an arc to the book. And in fact, there is a chiasmus, a grand chiasmus to the whole of the book. I mean, the book has some design features to it, but they may just be for me, or for the book itself. And you can be too clever by half and impose those designs on the reader, but they're kind of baked in. And so, if you wanted to read it left to right, there's nothing wrong with that. I think the book can and probably will be read as it is intended, and that is that the book is an attempt to pixelate, if you will, what it is that a poet does in the academy. And so each one of the sections is another piece of that pixelation. And so when you read it all, you get the picture, but you can start with any one of them.
Carey, what prompted our connection this morning was this webinar that's coming up on Wednesday I think it's 3 p.m. East Central Time. Why don't you talk about that? Because I think it's going to be delightful.
Well, it's a it's always a lot of fun when, you send a journalist the book and they immediately say, I I want to promote this with, X, Y, or Z. And so Mark Wingfield, who is a gifted journalist with the Baptist Global News Network, which don't be scared off by the word Baptist, which is a frightening word for most of our culture these days. But uh, Mark is a gifted journalist and writes far more broadly than just for um, uh, uh, kind of denominational particularity. So the webinar is going to be for any and all. I'm going to be suspicious. There are going to be a lot of academics that kind of lurk in the background. There are going to be some of my friends that actually, kind of show up to give support. So, I mean, I heard from somebody I hadn't talked to for 25 years from Louisville say she's an accomplished academic herself in the School of Dentistry there, and we knew the family when we lived there. And she said she's going to show up just to harass me, and so yeah, I think they're going to be the webinar itself is presumes nothing. So I think the entry fee here is just showing up on it, and hopefully folks will be able to find something that can feed them. Mark is an excellent journalist. I'm sure that he has great prompts for me. He's not shared them with me because he's an excellent journalist, and so he's got his questions, I'm sure. But I think that the whole goal of the webinar is just to provide an introduction to the book and maybe an invitation to becoming a better writer.
Well, I will be there, and some of my students will be there, Carey. So again,
Oh,
I
great,
have used
great.
I've quoted you so many times in my courses over the last year and a half. And so to the listeners, I will put the links to the webinar included with the podcast. And so again, thank you, Carey, for all you've done for so many of us and for what you continue to do and for being on the show this morning. I am very grateful.
As I say in the acknowledgments, it is impossible for me to calculate and quantify the debt that I owe to the authors I've enjoyed. The rough number of books I've seen into print now is somewhere around 850. And that's 850 chances for people to hate me, I guess. But what I've discovered is that what I know was given to me by being able to work on people's books, and editing, like writing, is running off a cliff. And it's being a good editor and being a good writer, I think, go hand in hand, in the sense that it takes you have to be fearless in that respect, and you don't get there unless you make mistakes and you fail, and I did. Failure is your best teacher. Success teaches you nothing. It fools you. Failure will instruct you. And boy, I've failed on books and I've failed my authors, but I've also enjoyed the gifts they've given to me. So you're one of my authors, and Conrad, I'm grateful for you for a host of reasons, but it's been a joy to work with you over now. What we're working on about our fifth book or something like that now.
It's like a fourth, yeah.
Fourth, is that right? Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
so it's been a fun ride.
Well, you've been terrific. And I'm so grateful that Providence brought us together at just the right time with Walter. It's been so much fun for me at this stage of my life. Thank you, Carey. I owe you a great debt, and I look forward to seeing you on Wednesday.
Thank you, Conrad.
Bye-bye.
Bye.